Welcome, everybody. In case we've never met before, I'm Judy Mark. I'm president of Disability Voices United. We are so happy that you are joining us. If you've never been to one of our SDP Connects, please introduce yourself in the chat because I feel like I'm seeing some names and faces that I don't know. So we're so happy you're joining us. We come together every other week. Sometimes we skip a week because of other things going on, but generally every other week. And we are, hold on, I just want to share this in my page. Okay. We come together, we have a library of the SDP Connects we have done in the past. I think we've probably done 50, 60, 70 of them in the past year and a half. Please go into our SDP library at theinterchange.org. All of this stuff is going into the chat, by the way. And I am really, we're hoping, oh, somebody's saying their son got approved for their second year. Yay, that it's always painful. All these transitions are painful. And we're hoping that we're going to provide you with some information today. I'm just waiting a little bit for a second to get started because I know a lot of people are still coming in. So an announcement before we get started with the presentation. We are announcing, hold on, I have to share my screen. Our conference for 2022, we went back and forth. Should we have an in-person conference with COVID? And we ultimately decided, and you all helped us make this decision because we polled you on it, that we're going to do it virtually. And it is going to be, oh, I should have a date here, but it's one-day conference all day. It's going to be on Friday, December 2nd. The actual registration and announcement of the conference will come into your inbox if you're on our mailing list. Make sure you're on it. Will come in by the end of this week. And it's called Breaking Through Barriers, Advancing Self-Determination. And we're going to work together at this conference to break down those barriers for individuals who are having problems and having barriers going into the program, and for the whole program itself is facing a lot of barriers. Independent facilitators, FMSs, regional centers, we're all facing barriers to make this program a success. And that is what we're going to focus on at this conference. So we really, really hope you will join us. There is no limit on the number of people who can come. This is our 6th conference that we're doing, and we have sold out in previous conferences. The ones that are in person, we always sell out. We have 600 people at those. And last year we did our first virtual conference because of COVID, and we had 1,400 people registered. So we hope we'll get a big giant turnout at this conference as well. The other announcement I have for you is that as part of your registration for the conference, you will get a copy of our latest updated version of Thinking Outside the Box. Hold on, I got to get a copy of it so you can see what the older version looks like. This is the March 2021 version, but as many of you know, so much has changed. Yes, and we will offer it in Espanol as well. It will be bound and beautiful in Spanish as well. That reminds me, Kira, people need to choose which book they want. Remind me to talk to you about that. So people will get, for each registration, you will get a copy of the book in either English or in Spanish. And directives are coming out left and right. Another one was just came out 2 days ago. We're anticipating another directive to come out tomorrow. So we're hoping that we're going to get you the latest information. It will be completed next month. For those of you who've gone onto our website to purchase this book, we've put a hold on sending you the book because we want you to have the latest information, things that actually changed in the program. So we don't want to be providing you with false information. So that is the reason it's not done is because of me, because I haven't finished going through I'm literally going through every single page of this book and updating, and it's like 300 pages, page by page, ensuring that everything in there is still accurate. So hopefully you will join us at this conference, get a copy of the latest edition of Think Outside the Box. And all of you, if you're on our mailing list, you'll get the announcement about the conference. And we will, it's going to be on this great platform called Whova, which is very, very easy to use. And we'll do lots of trainings with you about how to get on this platform. But all of the sessions will be on Zoom, so it'll look exactly like this meeting you're in right now, and you shouldn't have any problems with that. All right, so somebody's asking, Lourdes is asking about the directive that came out this week. Yes, before we get started, I can tell you about the directive that came out this week. This is a directive about payment for FMSs. I should really have it up on my screen, but I do not. Hold on, I'm going to get it so I can just read it to you. All right, here it is. It was from 2 days ago. Here, I'll try to share it so that I can go over it with you. It's a very important one, but it doesn't necessarily impact each person. So it's from the 12th of September. It says that the regional centers are being told by DDS that they must, so you'll look at these number 1 and 2, that the FMS provider must be notified within 3 business days of the planning team finalizing a change in a participant's spending plan. So obviously that's very, very important, because sometimes the spending plan is changed, the FMS is never made aware of it, and then the participant goes to the FMS and says, please hire this person or pay for this activity. And the FMS says, well, your spending plan is no different. This is going to actually impact our conference, because you all have to make sure you're in the self-determination program and you want your STP to pay for it. Then you have to make sure that there's a line item in your on your spending plan for it. And any of those changes, remember, when you change your spending plan, you have to notify both your FMS and your regional center, just so that they know it's happening. The second piece is even more critical, and that is that they're requiring, at least until the end of January, that regional centers must provide payments to the FMSs on a weekly basis. We know how important this is, because there are FMSs who are owed hundreds of thousands, if not over $1 million from the regional centers. And obviously this is not a good business model for any business if they're going to be owed so much money. And so I don't know how I'm going to find this, get this. I will try to get this onto into the chat. Okay, so that you can, this is not a slide, by the way, this is actually a letter, a directive that came from DDS. So I will try to get that in there at some point when I'm not doing anything else. Maybe one of my staff, I know not everybody could be here today, but if one of my staff could go onto the DDS website, it should be in there somewhere, but I'll also try to get it. Okay. So there's also, we're hearing some other, directives coming out in the near future. And so at our next SDP Connect, oh, there it is. Thank you, Lourdes. She put it in the chat. So at our next SDP Connect in a couple of weeks, we'll go over any new directives that are coming out. All right. So let's get into the business of today. So before we get started, I'll let you all know that you will have a chance to ask questions after this pretty short presentation. Your questions can be about anything. They can be about the presentation that I'm making. It can also be about any part of the self-determination program. You can ask questions in several ways. Number one, you can ask them through the chat. Ed Herzl, our communications coordinator, who also runs these meetings, she accepts them as a private message if you want to do it anonymously, but you can also just put it in the chat and she keeps track of all of that. including if it's in Spanish. All right. You can also use the raise hand feature and ask your question live on the air by going down to reactions and choosing the raise hand feature like I just did. And I will call on you. Right now, all of you are muted. We do this very intentionally because we want to ensure that our interpreters, our Spanish and Korean interpreters, as well as our closed captioning, is very clear for them. And if we hear people unmuting and having lots of background noise, it becomes hard to hear. But we will unmute you if you have a question for sure or a comment. All right, so let us get started. Oh, well, that didn't help me very much. Sorry. First, I need to share screen and let's see how this works. Okay, Ed, I'm gonna need, I'm using a different program, I'm not using PowerPoint, I'm using something else. So I need you to tell me what you see on the screen.
I only see your slide.
Yay, it worked, baby, it worked. Okay, so, because I have my little cheat sheet on the slides. Okay, everybody. So today we're talking about something called It's a Matter of Choice. We're comparing the self-determination program with the something called participant-directed services. Some of you have maybe never heard of participant-directed services. You're going to learn a lot today. But the participant-directed services, the reason we're doing this today is because we've been hearing rumors of people being pushed into participant-directed services instead of the self-determination program and being told, oh, self-determination is just too hard and complicated. You get the same thing from participant-directed services. And we want to make it very, very clear that they're not the same thing. And while we very much support having additional choice and control over your lives, which participant-directed services do provide, it is what we're calling internally, you know, like self-determination light, where you're not really getting a truly self-determined life, but you're having, you know, you're allowed to have a few choices. Okay. All right, so let's get started. How do I change the notes? Let's see. Oh, I did it. Okay. All right, so what I did is, with the help of Nina Spiegelman, we created a chart where we're comparing the self-determination program versus participant-directed services. So you've all heard the term SDP before, but PDS is the term for participant-directed services. Now, first of all, as you know, the self-determination program is a completely different service model. They call it a service delivery model. It is not the same thing as the traditional system. When you go into self-determination, you are on a different waiver. You go on the self-determination waiver, which is very similar, but it just means that you have lots more services you can choose from, so it needs to be a different waiver. The participant-directed services is part of the traditional service model, all right? So there are certain services you can use and others you can't. What is the history of it? So there was a 20-year pilot project in the self-determination program at 5 regional centers for about 200 people. It started, in 1998. In 2013, we were able to get a law passed that established a statewide program. Excuse me. Okay. As opposed to participant-directed services, for a lot of people, it's new, but it's actually not new. These services have been around for a very long time, and many people have used them over the years if they get the secret news to find out about them. Most of the time, people don't hear about this option, by the way. It became well known because during the pandemic, a lot of people were not able to get their traditional services, like day programs closed and jobs closed and work programs closed. Maybe your respite provider wasn't going to come in. And people needed to have more choice and control over their services. And so what DDS did is they expanded the number of services that can go under participant directed. And they continue to renew that. They did it through what's called an emergency directive. And every month they continue to renew that emergency directive. They have, DDS has said very clearly that they want to make this a permanent thing, that these new services that are under participant directed services will be permanent. But to do that, they have to change, they have to talk to the federal government, they have to get regulations passed. And these regulations are currently being considered. So it's going to take a few months. So for any of you who are using participant directed services, you're hearing like it's getting renewed every month. And I know it's making a lot of people very annoyed. So what are the services you can get? Hold on, the sun is in my eyes. Okay, good. So what is it that you get under participant, what are the differences in the services? So in the self-determination program, you're not bound by any of the traditional services. You can really think outside the box. In participant-directed services, there's only certain services that fall under it. And these services are only about hiring, scheduling, and supervising staff to perform the services, right? So it's only about staffing. In the self-determination program, all the services must be included in the federal waiver. That's that application, that SDP application we have with the federal government to get money from them for every one of our services. But if any of you have ever looked at our Think Outside the Box book, you realize that there's 26 pages of services. It's far greater, far more expansive than the services in the traditional system. It also includes, besides services of people who are, supporting you, it also includes paying for activities like art classes and paying for goods, like if you need durable healthcare equipment, or if you need, let's say, a supply to gain skills for work. Those things you cannot purchase ever in the traditional system, and you can do that in, well, actually the art class now you can, because social and recreational programs were restored, but you have to, the other thing is you don't have to use vendors in the self-determination program at all, but for many of the services in the traditional system, you have to use vendors. Now, let me explain more. So what are the kinds of services that you can use participant-directed services for? There's only a limited number. So all the time, you could have been getting respite, daycare, non-medical transportation, skilled nursing, and day services through participant-directed services. So for those of you who are like, oh, are you kidding me? I could have hired a nurse directly as opposed to using this nursing agency that I've been unhappy with. Yes, you could have gotten it if you had even known that it was possible. They added these additional services during COVID, and the intention is for them to stay permanently under PDS. And that includes personal assistance, independent living services, and supported employment services. So I'm going to go over what each of these services are very quickly in case you don't know what they are, because some of you may not, and some of you may have children who only use some. So respite, remember, is provided only in the home. It is to give a break to people who, to parents usually, but family members who care for that individual, to give them a break. Respite means, relaxation or a break, right? Daycare is childcare while a parent is working. So daycare is often after school care if both parents are full-time employees. And that daycare now you can hire the person directly. Or you could always done that. You maybe didn't know that. Non-medical transportation is any transportation the person might need to get to their IPP funded services, like a day program, like work, their job, something like that. Skilled nursing, I think it's pretty obvious, provided by a registered nurse or a licensed vocational nurse. Day services are those services that provide opportunities to move into employment or volunteer activities to be out in the community. For all of those services, I'll explain that in a second. The additional services include personal assistance, which is not in home alone. So respite is only in the home, but personal assistance is both in the home and in the community. To help people, integrate in the community. Independent living services is different. It helps adults gain the skills to be able to live, work in the community, such as meal planning, budgeting, mobility, like riding public transportation, those kinds of things. And then finally, supported employment services are supports to help people get and keep jobs in the community, including helping them think about the kinds of jobs that they might want. All right, so moving on. Funding. How is the funding work between the two? So for those of you who are in the self-determination program, you know that in self-determination, the services are paid for out of an individual budget that is determined through a process that you have in negotiating with your regional center. And then the actual way you're going to spend the money is put into a spending plan. That is very different than in the participant-directed services, where the services you received are provided and approved by the regional center through the IPP process. In the self-determination program, the services are paid for by an FMS. That is actually the same in participant-directed services. The difference, though, is in the self-determination program, the financial management service provider, or the FMS, is your choice. So there are about 8 or 10 in the state of California, and you can interview them. If you don't like one, you can leave and find another. You can fire them and hire another one. With participant-directed services, you must use the FMS that is assigned to you by your regional center. All right. So self-determination versus PDS, who can be hired as staff? Like this is pretty important to understand. So in both cases, they need to be 18 years old and legally eligible to work in the United States and pass a background check. I think those are like a minimum things we should require for anyone, that they pass a criminal background check, right? The difference, though, is in self-determination, you as the participant determine what the qualifications are for the workers that you hire. So if you are hiring a person to provide you with employment services, you do not have to say, oh, this person has to have 5 years experience supporting someone in employment, someone with disabilities in employment. You can say, all right, this person has never worked with people with disabilities before, but I want to be a chef, and this person's a professional chef, so I want them supporting me because they actually understand the field, even though they've never supported anyone. That's your choice. With participant-directed services, it specifically says under these services that they must have the skills, training, and education to provide those services. Now, in some cases, it's quite obvious, right? Like if you're hiring someone to be a skilled nurse, they show their credentials as a nurse. But you're working with your FMS, and let's say you're hiring someone to be your job coach or to do your supported employment, and you want that chef who knows nothing about disabilities but knows a lot about cooking. And it's possible that your regional center or the FMS might say, oh, this person is not qualified because they know nothing about disability. So that choice is to me, there's a very big difference with choice there. In the self-determination program, it is similar that parents of minor children cannot be paid to provide services, and spouses of adults cannot be paid to provide services. Yet parents of adults can be paid to provide any of the services in your self-determination program. In participant-directed services, it's the same, that parents of minors cannot provide services, but parents even of adults cannot provide certain services at all, including daycare, respite, personal assistance, or independent living skills. So it cannot be parents or a spouse providing those particular services. Other services like supported employment can be done by parents or a spouse. Who hires the staff? This is real important. So in the self-determination program, the participant always has that authority to hire the staff. Even if you're in the co-employer model, you still have the authority to hire staff. However, in the sole employer model, and if you don't know what I mean, please go back and look at some of our recordings about the different kinds of FMSs in our library. But in the sole employer model, you have complete authority. You have what's called employer authority to hire whomever you want, as long as they can legally work in the United States or over the age of 18 and they pass that background check. But you can hire whomever you want. In the co-employer model, an FMS can say your staff needs to have certain qualifications. In the participant-directed services, the FMS can, in basically every case, verify that the staff has skills and qualifications to perform the work. All right. So everybody's kind of in that co-employer model within participant-directed services. And so remember that in self-determination, you can decide what you want the qualifications and certifications to be for your staff. That is not the case in participant-directed services. And I wanted to point out one in particular. If you're using participant-directed services for respite care, that respite worker must have CPR and first aid certification. By the way, if you put the category in self-determination as a respite worker in self-determination, they also have to have CPR and first aid, which is why I tell everyone, do not put respite in your spending plan ever. Never, ever put respite in your spending plan, because you will have lots of hoops to jump through that you don't need to, and you should be just calling them personal assistants, okay? All right, so moving along. How much is the staff paid? This is probably the one that is the most different between these two services. So in the self-determination program, wages are decided by the self-determination program participant. You must stay within your budget. You cannot spend more than your budget is, but as long as you stay within your budget, you can pay people what you feel you need to pay them in order to attract good workers. In participant-directed services, the wages are set very specifically. I don't have the wages for every single service, but the examples that I found include personal assistance, supported employment, and ILS workers are paid $22.80 an hour, and respite workers are paid $17.03 an hour. All right, so that's barely above minimum wage. And I know that for many of you who are out there doing SDP, you realize that you can't possibly find anyone for $17 an hour, and you know how hard that is. The other great flexibility of the self-determination program is that you can include lots of benefits in your spending plan in order to attract and keep your workers. And that includes allowing for overtime, allowing for bonuses, allowing for special benefits such as healthcare, retirement, bereavement pay, other kinds of paid leave. With Participant-directed services, the regional center assigns that FMS to handle payroll, taxes, and reporting, and you do not have that flexibility to offer any kinds of incentives for that person to stay in that job. Finally, how do you participate in either of these options? So the work is harder under self-determination. I believe it's all worth it. You do need to go through an orientation, conduct person-centered planning, which of course you're supposed to be doing in the traditional system too. I am not convinced it's actually happening. You need to have an agreement on the budget with your regional center, and you have to produce a spending plan. In participant-directed services, you request it through an IPP or through a written request to your regional center, and the regional center approves it or doesn't approve it. It's pretty much that straightforward. You do have a bit of training, I believe, in order to figure out how to work with the FMS, and your staff member has to get what's called onboarded with the FMS and approved by the FMS, but the payment, everything that's happening is pretty much handled by the FMS. Who assists you in hiring, identifying, recruiting, and managing your staff? So in the self-determination program, you get assistance from independent facilitators and person-centered planners that don't exist in the traditional system. You also are going to start being able to take advantage of these specialists at the FMS agencies who will help you develop your spending plans. There are also regional center participant choice specialists who focus on both the self-determination program and participant-directed services. They're available to help you in both cases. Under PDS, the only help you're really getting is from your service coordinator and then from the regional center assigned FMS. But as far as sort of recruiting people, you're kind of on your own. So that is the basic difference. I'm going to end this screen sharing now. And I know I've seen a lot of stuff happening in the chat, but that is the difference, the differences that we see. And I wanted to give a chance for Tim. Tim, are you ready to go in a second? Okay. I wanted you to hear from an actual SDP participant for you to understand how he uses his self-determination program so that it works with his staff to his benefit. So go ahead and take it away, Tim.
Hi all, my name is Tim and I'm a staff member at DVU. I'm also a participant in the self-determination program. I'm charging through into my second year very soon, and right now my independent facilitators and I are in the process of discussing with my regional center on my budget. We are hoping that the negotiation will go well. I cannot believe that it's been almost a year since I started SDP, and it's been a total game changer. I no longer feel that I need to feed another quarter in the pinball machine to maintain my score. I feel that I'm getting the highest score every day to maximum my life to the fullest potential. I don't feel like that I'm tilting the machine each time I want to play and being a loser. Since starting SDP, I'm much more confident now than ever in my life. My friends and family, and even my staff members that has been with me for many years are noticing that I'm in control, but also not too demanding, because I like to treat everyone fairly. To be honest, I had no idea what participant-directed services even is and what is the purpose of the program when there is self-determination. I understand you can choose who you want to work with you in participant-directed services, and I'm sure that they also need to go through the background check and another FMS type of agency hires them. But Why does anyone want to go through all that trouble at enrolling into this program and have no say on their budget, how much to pay this person, and most importantly, not addressing your unmet needs? It sounds like the traditional system with a few tweaks here and there to get you by, just enough to get you to the next level, but not to conquer the game. Before I stop pressing play on my iPad, I want to give you my personal example how I structure my pay rates. I have multiple pay rates in place. Day rate, night rates, holiday rates, emergency rates, and so on. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything, but I have to make sure with my team that they are using the correct rates before signing off on their timesheet. And there are times where my employees make a mistake. But at least both me and my employees know that I'm paying them a fair wage for the services that they are providing me with. As I mentioned, I'm much more confident now than I've ever been. If someone asked me my thoughts on participant-directed services, I would give them a roll of quarters to try to match anyone's happiness and contentment and control and self-determination. Thank you.
Hey, I want to roll quarters. Bring it over to my house later. Thanks, Tim. That was great. And if anybody's interested in hearing about Tim's entire program and how it's changed his life, go to our Interchange library and look it up. It was like last December, I believe it was the last one of the year. So look him up from last year, and it's completely worth an hour of your time to listen to Tim and how SDP has changed his life. All right, so if you have a question that you would like to ask verbally or however you communicate, you can do that by raising your hand. But I've seen a lot of questions in the chat, so I'm gonna start with you, Ed.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. So our first question is from Kathy. Is there any reason a 24-year-old consumer would not be allowed to attend an adult day healthcare program for senior citizens, not for regional center consumers, paid through self-determination/FMS, if she can't find a local adult day program?
Okay, so that's really a question about the HCBS final rule. So for those who've not heard that term before, HCBS stands for Home and Community-Based Services that are funded by the federal government to ensure that people with disabilities, seniors, people with mental health disabilities, veterans, these are all home and community-based services funding. And the importance of it is that you are fully integrated in the community. The rule from the federal government is that all services must be fully included and you cannot be segregated. As a new waiver, as self-determination is a new program with a contract with the federal government, all of our services must be included in the community. Starting March of 2023, less than 6 months away, actually 6 months and 3 days, March 17th, you are required, everyone, all traditional services will be required to be fully integrated as well. So those adult day programs that you're talking about, they're not going to be around for traditional folks either. But let me explain. So I don't know this senior program that you're talking about, but if the seniors in that program are also under waivers, meaning so there's a whole bunch of home and community-based services, HCBS funding, federal funding that go to seniors as well, to the aging community, you can't be stuck with those folks either. You need to be integrated into the general community. So let's say you want to be in a class and that class has, 10 folks who are regional center clients and 30 folks who are, just from the community. That's going to be okay because it is an integrated setting and it's open to anyone in the community. But if there's a program where you can only attend if you have certain kinds of funding streams, it's not going to work. And this is just my take on it. Self-determination is about living life in the community. It is about living with choice and control over what you're doing every minute of your day. So if you are stuck in a program all day long where your choices are going to the mall or going to the park, that is not having choice and control of your life. If it is, we're eating lunch at 12, and I don't really care if you're not hungry at 12 because you're eating lunch at 12, that is not having choice and control over your life. If you have a program where you have a friend who wants to have lunch with you, right, Tim? Where you have a friend who wants to have lunch with you on Thursday afternoon, and you want to be able to leave your program to go out to lunch, and they say no, that is not having choice and control over your life. So that's really what they're looking at in this program is, are you surrounded by other people with disabilities, and do you have choice and control over your life? So I hope that helps. And I hope you'll think about ways to use your funding, your budget, so that you are really carving out everything that is in your person-centered plan that is saying, this is the life that I want. I like going to the movies. I don't like bowling. So I'm going to go to the movies as much as I want. And I'm going to go to the gym, and then I'm going to go to the library, and then I'm going to go to Disneyland. And these are the life I want. And I'm going to hire a staff member to help me live that life. All right, Ed, go ahead to the next one.
Absolutely. We have so many great questions today, Judy. Next one is for Anonymous. Actually, this is a combination of several questions that I'm kind of smushing together. Are there guidelines, laws, or rules in the self-determination program that give the regional center the right to dictate what kind of service you can access? For example, could they ask for ABA compliant progress reports if my child is in a program that is not ABA? Or could, if I'm a participant, could they say what program would or would not be appropriate for me?
So you have the authority to plan out where you want to go in your life and how you want to spend your budget. That you have that authority. It's part of the principles of self-determination. So no one at the regional center is allowed to say to you, no, this is where you should be doing things and this is where you should go. I know that it's much more complicated when you are receiving funding in your budget for behavioral therapy, and then you end up using it for something different. We have actually discussed this in many of our previous SDP Connects, and it does become a little more complicated. Remember that everything in your spending plan, every single line item in your spending plan must relate to one of the goals that's in your IPP. And your IPP is informed by your person-centered plan. So you start with your person-centered planning, then you move on to presenting that plan at an IPP and saying, here are the goals that I want to put in my IPP. Not every goal from your person-centered plan goes into your IPP, but the goals that are related to your disability go into your IPP. Then every single dollar that you spend has to relate to one of those goals. So if you're going to be receiving behavioral therapy as funding in your budget, you got to have some behavioral goals in there, right? And so those behavioral goals do not have to be addressed by behavioral therapy. You may decide that you want to do horseback riding or swimming or karate or meditation. I mean, there's so many different ways for people to adjust their body to different sensory issues that is not behavioral therapy. but you must make sure that if they're doing horseback riding or if they're doing meditation, that you're saying this is connected to that behavioral goal. We also know that regional centers want people to actually, they're really biasing people towards using behavioral therapy, or at least hiring a behaviorist to write an assessment every 6 to 12 months. I do have a lot of problems with that, but I also understand why regional centers need to have some sense of whether your behaviors, I hate the term behaviors, by the way, I think it's very ableist and negative. But the people who have challenges in their lives are being able to address those challenges, because that's the point of person-centered planning, is to be able to meet your hopes and dreams, but also to address any needs that you have in your life. So I hope that was helpful.
And just to, you totally covered the last part of the question, Judy. I just want to make sure you cover the first part.
And do you mind turning on your camera, just because when you're on Facebook, we're just seeing a black screen?
Of course. I'm a little camera shy, so folks, please don't tease me about my hair. It's 115 degrees where I'm at.
And it's so cute. I love it. So go ahead.
Judy, I appreciate it. The first half of that question was, let's say someone got ABA in their budget, right? They use it for another behavioral thing, not for ABA. Can the regional center turn around and say, we want an ABA compliant progress report now?
Yeah. That is a question that has been over and over been asked at our SDP Connects. We specifically asked it of the SDP ombudsperson, Susie Reekwarth, when she was here a few weeks ago. That I believe that has got to be clarified by DDS, because the 21 regional centers are doing it 21 different ways, and people can't be expected, if you're using a different kind of behavioral therapy or you're not using behavioral therapy at all, you cannot be expected to have an ABA therapist come in and do an assessment when they don't even know this individual and haven't been part of their lives and their process of kind of program services that they're getting. So something needs to be decided. I cannot tell you what's going to happen. Regional centers are running all over this because there is no since there's no direction there's from DDS, it's leaving everybody, all the regional centers, to do what they want to do.
Thank you for that, Judy. I have another question that is, again, a combination of several questions. Some of our new folks would really like you to expand on what the waiver means.
Oh, yeah.
What does waiver mean in the SDP? And is there a waiver in participant directive services?
Yeah, I hate using that term waiver. It's a terrible word. You should know that in 49 out of 50 states, everybody knows the word waiver. I don't think they know exactly what it means, but waiver is a normal term. In California, we talk about it regional center services, but okay, a waiver is the contract that the state of California has with the United States, with the federal government, so that every dollar we spend on people served by regional centers, that money is matched by the federal government. Sometimes for every dollar, they give us 50 cents. Sometimes, depending on the person and the service, it's 75 cents or even $1 for every dollar we spend. That waiver, for most people in the regional center system, in the traditional system, is called the DD waiver. Okay, it's the developmental disabilities waiver. Okay, and that DD waiver is not anything you ever need to worry about, but the way that people experience waiver services are, number one, getting regional center services, number two, being on Medi-Cal. So the route into waiver services is by getting on Medi-Cal, that's California's Medicaid service. And to be on, the third thing is to, if you're an adult, you're going to get on SSI, or supplemental security income. For those who are children who are in families that make above the poverty line and are not eligible for Medi-Cal, you can get on the waiver and on Medi-Cal because of your disability. The term is horrible. It's called institutional deeming. It's the worst expression ever. And basically what it means is that the state of California, through the regional centers, have deemed you to be so disabled that in another day and time, we would institutionalize you. And instead, we're going to keep you out of the institutions by keeping you in the community, by providing you with this home and community-based services funding, or HCBS. All right.
Thank you for that, Judy.
Yeah.
Another question. So,
oh wait, I didn't finish. I'm
sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize.
No, it's okay. I realized I didn't explain the different waivers. So there's the DD waiver, the developmental disabilities waiver, and then there's a separate waiver for the self-determination program, the SDP waiver. There's also other waivers that certain children are eligible, called the HCBA waiver. There's lots of waivers. I think there's probably 50 or 60 waivers in the state of California for all different communities and populations. But the primary ones in the traditional system are the HCBS DD waiver. And then for those in the self-determination program, you're in the SDP waiver. You do not need to do anything about this. You do not need to fill out any forms saying, oh, I'm moving into the self-determination program, let me change waivers. You should not, your regional center shouldn't even be talking to you about it, even though some of them do, and it's very irritating. I know there are some people who have issues with being on a specific type of waiver where they're getting like nursing services, and that's a little bit more complicated. We've talked about that here before, and I'm not going to get into the details right now, but I just don't want any. I've also heard somebody, by the way, I saw someone on Facebook, on the SDP Facebook page, make some like ridiculous comment saying, I refuse to go on the SDP waiver. It is outrageous that they are asking me to. I don't, why do you even care? It's just a way for the state of California to bring more money to pay for your services. We should all be happy with that and thankful for that. I think that's a really good idea. So I'm not sure why people are even having these conversations about waivers, because it's super not important to you unless you're this small group of people on one of these very, very specialized waivers. And I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about these HCBA waivers. I can do that at another time, but for the vast majority of people, just let the regional center handle it and you're fine.
Thank you for that, Judy. Here's another question that is sort of a combo. We have a lot of folks asking if the rates are different in participant-directed services versus traditional agency rates.
Yeah.
And then we have a comment from someone in the self-determination program. If the individual doesn't have the service when they transition, they get a lower rate from the regional centers, and it's always referenced as the PDS rate.
Yeah, so the PDS rate is lower than the rate in the traditional system. And the reason why it's lower is because the rate, that $22 or that $17 rate, is the rate that is being paid to the FMS, and the FMS has to take some of that money for liability insurance, for employers' burden of taxes, and just to make a little bit of money off of each each person that they're serving, right? And so so that rate is but it's just basically the person's wage plus this little bit of administrative costs of the FMS. In the traditional system, if you have an employer, let's say you're getting supported employment, they're usually going to be using a vendored agency. That agency often has an office, which requires electricity and a copy machine and phones and supervisors. Then there's the owner of the agency who might make a whole bunch of money and who takes a little cut of everything. And so those rates are going to be higher because they are they have all of these administrative costs. Okay, so so I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Judy. I'm going to go a little out of order here, folks. I normally go strictly in chronological order, but since we're talking about this, Stephen has a question that essentially amounts to, Stephen is an independent facilitator in the Los Angeles area, and one of his clients says that the health insurance need to be paid, or one of his clients' FMSs says the health insurance for a staff member must be paid by their participants' budget. And she said that the FMS, which is Rick's, told her $400 a month needed to come from her son's budget and around $150 from the staff member to pay for his health insurance. Is this typical? Is it even allowed for FMSs to request money out of a participant's budget to pay for a staff's health insurance? Since we were discussing why there might be reductions in
Yeah. So California has a law that if a person works over a certain amount of hours per week and they're employed by an agency that has more than a certain number, I think it's 50 employees, that you are required to provide them, I think it's over 30 hours a week of work, but put in the chat if I'm wrong about this. And I believe you have to have over 50 employees. I could be wrong, put it in the chat if I'm wrong. But you are required to pay for health insurance for them. And that does need to come from your budget. However, you do not, it doesn't mean that the employer must provide that health insurance. The person themselves could find their own health insurance, and you can reimburse, and you could order your FMS to reimburse them for the health insurance. It sounded like it was about $550 a month for health insurance for that person. That is a huge amount of money for health insurance for most people. Like, there's obviously some people who are older and maybe want a much more expensive plan. But I can tell you that in my son's plan, now he's in the sole employer model, we provide health insurance to his staff. His staff are not old. They're not young, but they're not old either. And we explored health insurance, private health insurance from them, and it came out to about $300 a month. And so we have in his spending plan, in my son's spending plan, $300 a month per employee for health insurance. They submit their receipt every month to the to the FMS, and the FMS reimburses them for their health insurance. So the critical thing is that the person must have health insurance paid for by the employer, and you are doing that even if you do it on your own versus a $550 a month through the employer. That sounds like a lot.
Thank you, Judy. I have another question that, again, is general. I've heard this from several different people. Some participants have been told by either their FMS or their regional center that providers have to meet certain qualifications. Is this true, and under what circumstances? For example, someone saying that their daughter hired a person for assistance using Cricut, which is this like, it's a crafting device essentially.
Oh, okay.
And that they would use to make mugs and shirts, and the regional center is asking for certifications for that person. Would that be appropriate?
No, it is not appropriate. In the self-determination program, you declare the certifications unless the person has to have a degree, like they're providing a service like a psychologist or a nurse or a speech therapist, or even if you're talking about behavior therapy, there are certifications that are required, which is why I tell everyone to be very careful what you call a service in your spending plan. Do not call a service something, do not call a service something that you will regret later on, okay? Like calling it respite when it's unnecessary, because then that person has to have CPR training, or calling it nursing services when really just that person is providing medication once a day. So just be very careful what you call it in the spending plan, and you should be able to decide the qualifications. Somebody who's teaching art, no FMS should be meddling around and asking you if this person has experience teaching art. That is your job to assess that. And I want to know who it is, that which FMS is doing that, because that's wrong.
Thank you for that, Judy. I have a couple of questions that I'm going to combine. We have lots of great questions. I want to get through them. Can a personal assistant or daycare or respite, can all of these things be paid through the self-determination program?
Almost anything can be paid for through the self-determination program. It's the traditional system that has very limited services that are pre-described and that are designated by the state of California, and regional centers are told this is what you can and cannot fund. In the self-determination program, there is a book of A to Z, from acupuncture to, I don't know what a Z is, but there's a whole bunch of really cool things. And one of the big sort of generic service codes is called community integration services. And that's where that art class, that gymnastics class, that creating a community club, a hiking club, whatever you do, the support staff that you have to join the hiking club and Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, those are services in order to ensure you're integrated in the community and we stop segregating people with disabilities. And so it's really important for you to understand the great freedom that you have in the self-determination program and not allow regional centers to restrict that freedom. By the way, not every regional center does that. There's a lot of regional centers who are empowering people and saying that sounds like a really great idea for your life. But there are others who are micromanaging us, and we have to push back when they do that. So it's, we have to find that balance.
Thank you for that, Judy. I have a follow-up from the question about the art teacher. It's not an FMS that's asking for the certification. It's Central Valley Regional Center.
Oh, there you go.
So no. There you go.
You should be going to the SDP ombudsperson and complaining about this.
I will put the link, folks, after I'm done reading this chat. I'll put the link in the chat for you to do that. Or Kira, if you're listening, if you could help me out there, that would be great. If not, don't worry about it. Several people, Arun, Debbie, a couple of anonymous people have been asking, Judy, what does personal assistant services mean? What is that equivalent in the traditional system? A bunch of people are saying, I've never heard of a vendor that has this category of worker. And does this mean, some people are saying, doesn't that mean they'll be paid less? So could you speak a little bit about why you said don't use respite in your IPP, use personal assistant services?
Yeah. Well, let me correct myself. Don't use respite in your IPP. Don't even use personal assistance in your IPP. Like, honestly, if it's a person who's integrating you in the community, use community integration services. Okay. And there are no rates in the self-determination program. So don't worry about that you're calling it a personal assistant in the self-determination program, because you're not subject to the rates. That doesn't matter. So personal assistant is a service in the traditional system. It is not a service that we care about it does exist in self-determination, but you don't have to call it that. It's basically, it's for adults or children served in their own home and in the community. Okay. That's all it means. So respite exists to give parents a break. Personal assistance exists to get people support in their home and in the community. It's very different. Some regional centers only provide personal assistance for adults, even though they are allowed to give it to children too. And it becomes this very big problem in the traditional system where the only service anybody's eligible for when you're a child is respite. And you're supposed to stay in your home all the time. And I think that's really quite problematic. When you're a 15-year-old person, you should be leaving your house and you don't need a babysitter. You need an assistant to support you. So that's the difference. That is in the traditional system. It's not something I ever use. Lourdes puts in, it's called Community Integration Supports Code 331. You all should not need to be experts on every single code. This is why you're supposed to find yourself a really good independent facilitator. All right. Your FMS is also supposed to be providing you supports to figure out what code to put things under. All right. Thank you, Lourdes, for putting in the service definitions as well. You'll see it's 26 pages.
Thank you, Judy. So next up, I have a question from Janicia, who asks, does approved by regional center with participant directed services mean that service provider is vendored by the regional center?
No. Great question. No, the person who is hired does not need to be vendored, but they do need to be onboarded with the FMS. So the FMS is the vendor. The FMS, remember, is financial management services. They're vendored with the regional center, and the person who's providing that participant directed services must be onboarded, meaning they have to be over 18, pass a criminal background check, have legal authority to work in the United States, and meet those qualifications that the FMS and regional center decide that they need. That is very different than the way it'll work in the SDP. You know what I'm going to do real quick, Ed, is I'm going to ask Amalia Contreras to unmute and go ahead and ask your question.
Sí, buenas tardes, disculpes en español. Solamente quiero preguntar, ¿la orientación se debe de agarrar para autodeterminación solo en el centro regional que te pertenece?
Oh, great question. You would have only heard that question if you had turned on your English channel, so I'll repeat it. But if you have not turned on the English channel and you were hearing Spanish, please do that right now, because just in case we have another question in Spanish or Korean. She was asking whether you have to go to the orientation in your own regional center, and also if it's the same thing as onboarding. So they're two different questions. So you do not need to go to the orientation at your regional center. And in fact, the State Council on Developmental Disabilities is putting on orientations basically every day, all day long, and you can sign up for that. I believe, Will, you put a link in the chat, so maybe if you don't mind putting it in again. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Will Sanford, my personal assistant. So that is a orientation you can go to at any time. You sign up, and I went to it. It's like very easy to schedule. And they have it in multiple languages. You can also go to the orientation at your regional center. Now, the one that the State Council is doing is like 2 hours long, and the one that some regional centers are doing are 8 hours long. Which one would you rather go to? So I would recommend, I know if you're a regional center of Orange County person, they're asking for 8 hours. So you might want to think about going to the State Council one. There's plenty of time for you to ask questions at that. So onboarding is a totally different term. It is different than orientation. Onboarding, to me, and it can be used in lots of different ways, but onboarding is when you take someone you hire and bring them on to staff through the FMS. So there is onboarding that is done both in the self-determination program and in participant-directed services. Onboarding means filling out the application, filling out the W-2 forms, or W-4 or whatever it is, making sure you do your criminal background check, and other requirements that you have as a staff member. So that's what onboarding is. All right, go ahead, Ed.
Thank you for that, Judy. So I have a question from Yadira. I've heard that some FMSs have been telling participants that they will not pay wages to service providers over $30 an hour. Has anyone else heard this? And are FMSs allowed to do that?
No. They are not allowed to do that. I need to know who you're talking about. Put it in the chat or private message me. They cannot set a cap. I know lots of people who are paying more than $30 an hour to certain people. You know, I'm not saying that everybody deserves that, but I personally pay more than that to a person who's providing specific services to my son. So no, the answer is definitely no.
Thank you, Judy. Another question from Beth. Can a regional center require that you use natural supports? For example, can a regional center require an adult consumer's aging mother provide natural support in lieu of funding needed service hours?
Yeah. We've talked about this at a couple of times in previous SDP Connects as well. They are wrong. Natural supports, its definition in the Lanterman Act of natural supports is unpaid supporters like family members, friends, neighbors, coworkers who voluntarily help the person out in their daily lives. So an example of a natural support is Tim talks about this in last December, is that he has his paid staff, and then he has backup paid staff. But if the backup to his paid staff is unavailable or there's a crisis, he has some friends who serve as natural supports in a crisis who can be there. Oftentimes it's the mom and dad who need to show up because a lot of staff, particularly during this time of COVID, have called out. So that, but they have to voluntarily agree to it. So no one can force anyone in the self-determination program to use a natural support. Do not confuse natural supports with generic resources, because that you are required to use. Generic resources are alternative ways to fund that same service that other agencies can fund. For example, educational services should be funded by the school district. Behavioral therapy can often be funded by your health insurance program. Same with occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy. You must get your insurance company to pay for that first. If they say no to you, then you can talk about having the regional center pay for it through the SDP. So I don't want anyone to confuse generic resources with natural supports, because they're very different things.
Thank you, Judy. Update on that previous question. Several folks are saying it's Aviana. One person is saying Aviana also sets a total budget cap.
Yes.
And another person is saying Aviana doesn't pay mileage for providers. So just so we're keeping track of that.
Real quick on the budget cap. It's not so much that Aviana has a budget cap. It's not like they say, oh, if your budget becomes too big, we're kicking you out. They're not going to bring you in the first place. They will not have large programs, which I, of course, have said to them is very problematic, but Aviana will not take people. I don't remember the cap. It was like 100,000 or 150,000, over 120,000. So anything over 120,000 cannot be used. You cannot use Aviana. There are other FMSs that you can use. It basically means that any adult, because most children don't have budgets anywhere near that. But if you are an adult who lives in supported living and lives on your own and lives and has 24/7 support needs, you are not going to be using Aviana, and it looks like Cambrian has the same restriction. So you're going to be using another FMS. To me, that is a very serious problem. It's something we'll talk about at our big conference for sure, and something that we need to dialogue. You know, what is the reason why? There are legitimate reasons why they won't do it. They won't do it because they end up having to put out too much money that they're not getting paid back from the regional centers. All right. So that's obviously the problem, is that when you're an FMS and you're owed $1 million by regional centers, you don't want to have lots of big budgets, right? If we can resolve this issue to get FMSs paid in a timely way, hopefully we can advocate for all the FMSs to have larger budgets.
Thank you, Judy. I have a question from Julie.
And then after this one, we'll go to the calls, to the hand raises.
Of course. I have a question from Julie. Can I buy my sister a treadmill through the program, through SDP for exercise, assuming it's in the IPP, assuming it's in the yeah.
Yeah, I never say yes or no to people buying any specific thing, because it's all what was in the person-centered plan. So don't go and say, I'd like to buy this device, because that's meaningless to me. It is what you need to do is to say, okay, in the person-centered plan, we explored that this individual has goals to get in better physical shape. Maybe they're suffering from heart disease or high blood pressure, or they need to lose some weight or whatever. You know, so you're laying that out, and the person is bought into this idea. It is not that you say, my son needs to lose weight, but we're not buying him a treadmill because he has no way he's ever going to go on a treadmill. You know, so that individual, it has to be about what that individual wants. It is what is important to them, not just what's important for them. So if in fact that person expresses in their person-centered plan that they want to get healthy, and that the way they want to do this is by having regular access to a treadmill, okay, then you might want to think about it. Would it be better to hire them a personal trainer? Would it be better to put them in a gym where they have access to lots of different equipment so they don't get bored with that piece of equipment? I need you to think about this long term. You're not buying a treadmill because the family also wants the treadmill. It is, I say this over and over again. The self-determination program is not about buying things. If you need to buy something in order to meet your goals, then put that in your spending plan. But what we're seeing, and what we saw in the first couple of years, that people were like, price is right, and they had a certain amount of money, and they were just figuring out all the stuff that they could buy with it, as opposed to looking at the person-centered plan, figuring out what this individual wants in their lives, and then figuring out how to get it there. And usually that is through hiring people who can help them get it, right? It's not meet their goals. It's not about those things, but those things are very important at times, particularly like durable healthcare equipment. Let's say you need a second walker, but Medi-Cal will only pay for one walker, but maybe you need one at school as well. You can put that in your plan, because that's an important thing for you to be able to access the school. So these are the things that are really important for you to understand when we're talking about buying items. All right, I really try to keep it as much to a minimum, and you have to be able to justify it in your person-centered plan. Sonia Morales, go ahead.
Oh, hello. I have a question. My son receives his ABA right now through a traditional, and when he moved to self-determination, he not gonna receive services for the company he provides services right now. So do you think could be safe for me to allow money to have a person to give me a report stating like my son still need ABA or support?
Why are you asking, Sonia, if it would be safe to do that?
Because I'm not going to any ABA company, so I want to provide people doing the, walking with him or helping him with the iPad, with the communication device, but I'm not planning to use any ABA company. And I'm worried that after a year, they won't give me the money of ABA
Mm.
services because I don't have an ABA company.
Right. Yeah. We talked about this a little bit earlier, Sonia, and have brought this up many times that ABA is not right for everyone. ABA doesn't necessarily meet everyone's goals. And yet regional centers pretty much only fund ABA therapy, most of them. Some of them fund other kinds, but most of them only fund ABA. And so you may say, we're going to address the goals that are in his IPP related to behavior, like things like self-regulation, social skills, those kinds of things. We're going to address them in different ways than ABA. Where regional centers are struggling is if they only fund in the traditional center, the traditional system, ABA therapy, then it's really quite, how do they assess whether he still needs behavioral therapy for your next year's budget? And so DDS is really going to have to weigh in on this. And Sonia, you're going to, at this point, probably need to work with your regional center to try to come up with a less restrictive way to determine what kinds of supports and services your son needs to meet those behavioral goals.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks. Hey, friend Susan, how are you?
Hi, Judy. I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Thank you for taking my hand, the raised hand. Anyway, I just have a question because it seems like this is happening because of the length of how to be approved in self-determination. I have a client. I don't want to mention the regional center because they might not pay me. I'll email you.
Okay.
Anyway, the client has an adult son and she wanted to do a self-determination. So I made a PCP for her. I submitted it. The regional center accepted it. And then we had a first meeting of the PCP. But then on the first meeting, they said, are you happy with your traditional services for your son? And she said, yes. So they said, well, then you don't need self-determination at this time if you're happy with the services. So in other words, it's been like almost 6 months and we just had our PCP meeting, right? Meeting. So the lady, the mother just got, really discouraged because first of all, we just talked to the FMS, we were doing our part, but then they were just giving her a hard time. So she figured, they were saying, oh, if you're going to go to self-determination, you're going to have to be in charge of all the billing. You have to do the POS, issue all these things like this. They're discouraging her. Mm-hmm. So finally, she just canceled. She said, I don't want to be in this kind of difficult situation. Anyway, my son is right now, I am happy with the traditional services, but I just want to get more services for my son with self-determination, which I heard in orientation. So I already did the PCP. I explained to her, and how do I get paid for that? And she said, well, just bill them, bill everything that you need, but I'm not interested anymore. I mean, I can't really encourage her. She's like a dead end. So I think this is happening everywhere. I just wanted to know I can still bill for it. 4 hours I have the PCP. Yeah.
So you can definitely still bill for it, Susan, but I need you to report this privately. So you send in the bill, but then I need you to report it privately to the ombudsperson. This is something that we have been talking to the ombudsperson's office about for even before Susie was the ombudsperson, that regional centers are not allowed to discourage people from going into the self-determination program. And this is not the only case. Tim will tell you he was discouraged from going into the self-determination program. I have heard it repeatedly. It often happens more with families of color, with immigrant families, and with self-advocates who are adults who are not living with their parents. And we're hearing this very consistently. And this needs to stop. And I want, every time anyone is discouraged from going into the self-determination program, I want you to write the ombudsperson and let them know, because then hopefully they will say something to DDS to say, we need to put out a directive saying that service coordinators are prohibited from discouraging people from going in the program. And they go by group, like they're like intimidating us.
in order to like, okay, we're, minority. So we're like, I can't really control the meeting. I just say what's in the
Right.
law.
Right.
So, okay, I will definitely go directly to Susie. Thank
Yeah,
you
thank
very much,
you.
Judy.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, you too. Say hi to Louie. Our sons grew up together. So this is the parents. We're always together. Doesn't matter how many years it's been. Young Lee, go ahead. You may be our last question, unfortunately. Go ahead, Young. Young Lee, are you there? Okay, not hearing you. All right, do we have any other last question, Ed, in the chat?
Oh, I'm sure we do. Let me try and pick out a good one.
I am so sorry. I was trying to get to the mute button.
There you go. Good.
So several questions. One is the recent cost of living adjustment from regional center.
Mhm.
Did they included the next year 2023 cost of the minimum wage adjustment?
Yeah, so not yet, but we are hearing that a directive from DDS is going to come out to regional centers about that in the next week. So we're definitely regional center, self-determination budgets will get some adjustment for minimum wage increases. And there's also some discussion about rate increases as well, because many services in the traditional system got rate increases. And not everybody has been able to get those same increases in their self-determination budget. So we're hearing that something's going to come out in the next week, and we're waiting to see exactly what it says.
Right. So in the part of we're actually in the third year of planning, for the planning for the third year, which is coming up in November, which means last year when we did this, we did it 2 months before, and we were still late by the first 3 months. We had to pay our services by ourselves.
Oh my God!
Because they couldn't get that budget approved. Now we're pulling it 1 month earlier. Unfortunately, this is coming up, and I'm still trying to figure out, should I wait? Should I do this with what we have and then submit the revised budget with the new funding, with the new information as they come out?
You go ahead and get started with the process, because you can adjust your budget up with the minimum wage and rate increases anytime. So don't delay moving into your third year, everyone, or your second year. Get that process started, and you can always adjust your budget when you're in it. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Second question is that is it possible? There was a DDS statement that says we could move 10%, anything under 10% of a certain category into something else. And I'm getting pushback from the regional center saying, no, you cannot do that.
Yeah, so we're running out of time, and that's a very huge question, which we've taken on in the past, talking about changing your budgets. I definitely suggest you go into the interchange.org and look under self-determination and some of our previous SDP Connects, where we talk about the spending plan and changing your spending plan, because you are allowed to change your spending plan and move things around within the categories without any issues. So there shouldn't be that problem. Once again, if you're having problems with your regional center, you should be contacting Susie Requarth, the ombudsperson. The more she hears from us, the more she knows that things need to change, and the more recommendations she can make to DDS to improve the program. So please write her. I am going to go. We have to stop now because we lose our interpreters. But once again, I want to remind you that if you're on our mailing list, we're going to announce, hopefully by Friday, our SDP conference on December 2nd. It will be virtual, called Breaking Through Barriers, Advancing Self-Determination. Make sure you're on our mailing list to get invited to register for this conference. You can have the regional center pay for you if you're not in self-determination, and you can have your SDP budget pay for it as well. It'll be $75 per person, and we'll include a free copy of the latest updated version of Think Outside the Box. So we thank everyone for being here today, and we will see you all in 2 weeks. I'm not sure what we're going to talk about yet, but it'll probably be our conference. So thanks everyone, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Be safe out there.